There you go. Well, welcome to tonight's candidate forum, and if you're watching online, now John, I don't have the tally light on, so is that going for us, the camera? We'll just make sure that people can see us as well. Brilliant. So welcome if you're watching online or if you're watching in a recorded way to the candidate forum for Badgerys Creek, where we've got some set questions and some questions from the floor. The opportunity will be there to text questions or use the Slido format to be able to share questions. Now, the candidates, as I got off the website today, I don't think I've introduced myself. Chris Braga, the Senior Minister of Grace West Anglican Church. Welcome, it's good to see you. And a particular welcome to Tanya, who's with us. So thank you, Tanya. Now, the invitation was made to particularly I understand there'd be two candidates for our electorate. Does that sound right? At this stage. I looked online this afternoon, there were two candidates. Gary and Thane, the Labor candidate, bring up that slide, there we go. He was extended an invitation for tonight, understood the nature of the invitation and the questions that were going to be asked, and was busy and wanted to pass on his apologies. So I'm doing that now. But if there's any questions you want to ask Gary, you can just go to the Labor Party's website and look him up, and there's a Facebook and some Instagram information there if you want to ask him any of these questions. Sadly, we won't have the opportunity to respond to anything that is said this evening, but we would have very much liked him to have been here. But we do have Tanya with us, and we're very thankful that she accepted this invitation. If she hadn't accepted this invitation, it wouldn't be much of an event at all. So thank you so much for making the trip here this evening to answer these questions that we have. Now, what we're going to do is Tanya's going to have 5 minutes to share, and then there's going to be a set of 4 questions. Tanya's had the questions previously, and there's going to be a bit of a video about each question as an introduction. And they're 4 questions of concern to people of faith, and then Tanya has 3 minutes to respond to each question. After that, we're going to have an opportunity to ask questions. And the idea is that we do so via text message, and John's going to bring that number up now. So you can either text John, which is the simplest way, and to do that, send a text message to John, and that will come up on the screen for us, or you can join in and just go to slido.com and use that number, and that will then appear. And if you scan that code, that will also allow you to see that as well. Okay, it might be a brief time this evening, but I hope it's a helpful one, and a helpful one for engaging with the issues before us in our state and the issues that you've got on your heart. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to ask our questions and have this time together. Now, one of the things as Christian people, as a Christian person, very conscious that our politicians, all of them serve as God's servants. The scriptures say this is from Romans chapter 13. It says, "For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They're God's servants, agents of wrath for bringing punishment on wrongdoers. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience." So we're very conscious of those that rule over us and that they and our place in the world under their rule. So we very much welcome Tanya here with us. So Tanya, if you'd like to 5 minutes to share, is this what you're expecting? Oh, yeah. You can talk for 5 minutes, right? You know, that's. So 5 minutes is all yours, and then we'll have the questions.
Okay, fantastic. I'll just put my cup of tea down there. I just want to make sure I get the right time. Well, good evening, everyone who are in the room and those online. Can I please say a big thank you to Chris and the team here at Grace West Anglican for organising tonight's event. So congratulations to you, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you and also to answer your questions to the best of my ability. I have a stopwatch here, so I'll stick right on time. So a little bit about me. So in the room, those online won't see, but I have my husband here, Mark. We've been married 26 years, and we have 2 children. Have a daughter who's 15 and a half and a son who is 6 and a half. We've been living here in Penrith since we've been married, but you grew up here in Penrith, my husband did, so he's a local through and through. I actually originally grew up in Newcastle, which is just north of Sydney, and I was raised in a family with a mum and dad and an older brother. My father actually was a minister for his whole career, so he was a minister in what was known as the Assemblies of God movement. So I was what they called a PK, which is a preacher's kid, for many, many years, and went to a Christian school and had a really fantastic upbringing in the sense of what are those traditional values that keep a family together, that keep a society solid. And it's those values that my husband and I continue to live by today, and how we also raise our family and how we contribute to our society. I moved to Sydney actually after school. I was 17, I left home, and I went to university. So I studied physiotherapy and graduated as a physiotherapist. I didn't like it, so I left the profession. So please, no one ask me anything medical, because I've moved on from that. But I did lots of different things in terms of career. I was a TAFE teacher part-time. I ran my own small business on the side. I was an executive manager for a global company at one stage. I did lots and lots of different things. And it wasn't until my husband and I decided to start our family that I had a sense of, like, the next generation are actually coming here to live not only on the earth, but they're coming here to live in our community. And I really wanted to be proactive and active to make our world here a better place for them. And so the idea to move into public service really stemmed from that. It has only ever been to work to make the community better. That's it. That's my vision. Never in a million years did I dream that I would be a member of state parliament, that I would have been a minister, I would have been sitting around the cabinet table at one stage. I had no personal aspirations for career advancement in that way. It was truly just, what can I do to serve and to help and to make our world, whether it's the world of Penrith or the world of New South Wales, better. So I moved into local government in 2008, and my husband as well was re-elected on council here at Penrith. We were both serving on council as councillors, and our first child, Laura, was I think about 8 months old at the time. And I really took that role as a community representative to heart, and I worked really hard to find those issues that people were struggling with, but they just didn't know where to go to get help. So in that effort of being really proactive, I really started to see that there were some very, very serious and systemic challenges that our community across Western Sydney was facing in 2008, 2009. And the thought was like, wow, if I'm really going to make a difference to our community, like a significant difference to the community in terms of a new hospital, in terms of upgrading our roads and making them safer and better schools and air conditioning in schools, etc., all those things that just make life and living that much easier and more comfortable, I really needed to think about moving to the state, that state level of government. And that's why I decided to put my hand up in 2010 to be pre-selected to become a member of the state parliament under the Liberal team, because I really believe that they had the ability to manage money, manage the budget, which would provide the money to do the building and to upgrade our community like never before. And so that's why I moved to try and get into the state parliament to see the changes that we've now, I guess now some kids just take for granted. They're brand new school and the Northern Road, 6 lanes, and all those sort of amazing developments. But it doesn't just happen overnight. It actually takes planned, considered and hard work to achieve those outcomes. But that's what I've been a part of the last 12 years, and I'm very, very grateful. I feel very blessed to be a representative of the community, to stand up and speak up for what we need out here in Western Sydney, and to work hard and deliver those. So that's my introduction. Tick.
Well done. Now I think that what we'll do is, if you just stand here with me, we'll play the questions. There are going to be 4 questions, and then Tanya will answer them. And John, if you can just make sure that the video is going through to live stream, and not looking at us, that'd be great.
Religious people and organisations have long played a crucial role in our communities. A large proportion of our education, health and social services are provided by faith-based organisations, and nearly all of Australia's largest charities have Christian roots. People of faith continue to contribute to our society's welfare because of their religious values, and governments recognise their contributions by partnering with them to deliver important services. This is now under threat from new laws that undermine the very heart and soul of faith-based organisations. As a result of recent amendments to anti-discrimination law in various states, faith-based organisations such as churches, synagogues, mosques, religious schools, charities and aged care can no longer insist that their staff adhere to or model their religious beliefs and values. At the federal level, the recent Australian Law Reform Commission consultation paper, issued at the request of the Labor government, escalates this threat. This strikes at the heart of a religious organisation's ability to preserve their ethos and effectively carry out their religious mission in service to their communities, and is a huge blow to both religious freedom and freedom of association. This is happening despite a growing awareness of people being seriously mistreated because of their religion, and the wide consensus that religious freedom is vital and needs to be protected. While it is right and proper to protect individuals from unjust discrimination, these new laws fail to get the balance right between the freedom of people of faith to operate faith-based institutions and the freedom of individuals who do not support that faith. And it is not hard to get the balance right. The Commonwealth Religious Discrimination Bill had bipartisan support on this issue, and the New South Wales Religious Freedoms and Equality Bill had the support of a bipartisan Joint Select Committee. Each of these had sensible mechanisms that provided robust protection against religious discrimination for individuals, while at the same time recognising that it was not discriminatory for religious bodies to operate in accordance with their religious beliefs. We allow other groups formed around a set of values, such as unions and political parties, to employ people who agree with their beliefs and ethos, but are now at risk of denying the same right to faith-based organisations. This state election, ask your candidates, will you support legislation that both protects religious individuals from discrimination while also protecting the freedom of religious bodies to operate in accordance with their values and to preference staff who align with them?
Okay, now not all the videos have the question exactly as I presented them to Tanya, so I think one of the next videos the question might be a little bit different, and so this is the form of question, and also Tanya's been aware of. This question here, will you support legislation that protects the freedom of religious bodies to operate in accordance with their values and to preference staff who align with them? Now, as we described to the candidates, they had 3 minutes to speak to this question. If you wanted to ask a follow-up question, you could later. But otherwise, Tanya, over to you. 3 minutes.
Thank you. The short answer is yes. There's no question about that. Freedom of religion, freedom of faith is enshrined in international human rights laws as well as in our constitution, and it's also enshrined in the constitution of the Liberal Party that I represent. I think what's also very encouraging is that Premier Dominic Perrottet just today, was it last night, actually gave a speech at a New South Wales Faith Communities Town Hall, and in that speech he also expressed his full support to ensure the protection of freedom of faith, freedom of religion. Are we facing some challenges in that area? Are things not always perfect? Yes, that's correct. And we do have small and big challenges in that area. But I think fundamentally, as your representative, I will always stand up for freedom of faith and freedom of religion and freedom of expression. It's a fundamental aspect to our democracy, and it is something that we should also be vigilant, whether you're in politics or not, be vigilant in order to ensure you protect it. Not only for yourselves, but more importantly for the generations that come after us. If I can also state that when that upper house inquiry presented the way forward to the New South Wales New South Wales Liberals and Nationals, I was in full support of that, and that was when the former Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, was the leader of the New South Wales and of our team. And we supported that finding of that committee. But her position at that time was to try and get a federal piece of legislation passed, which would be covering the entire state and territory, to set that national framework rather than just establish a New South Wales-based set of laws. Unfortunately, that piece of legislation, we know it wasn't successful federally, so there is a space, there is an avenue whereby New South Wales can move and can strengthen the protections for people of faith and people of religious belief, which does not contravene other people who may not hold a belief system like some of us do. And I think what's also important is that Upper House inquiry, it had a mixture of representatives from different parties on that committee, and they managed to work out an agreed position. So there is a way forward, and I certainly, if I am the member for Badgerys Creek moving on into the next term of government, it is something that I will be pushing for whoever holds government in New South Wales, because it is a missing piece in New South Wales protections. We have less protection here than there are in other states, and that needs to be addressed.
Hi, I'm Reverend Stu Cameron from Wesley Mission. Did you know that Australians lose $25 billion each year through gambling, and half of the total losses are through poker machines? Australia is home to nearly 80% of the world's pub and club poker machines. The problem is worse in New South Wales. New South Wales could be dubbed the pokey state. New South Wales is home to almost half of the poker machines in Australia, just over 86,000 in pubs and clubs, and 1,500 at the start. In the last 30 years, people across New South Wales have lost $135 billion through poker machines. The most recent data available shows that between July and September 2022, people across New South Wales lost more than $2 billion to poker machines in pubs and clubs. Gambling doesn't just affect an individual person alone. For every person impacted, 5 to 10 others are also harmed. Harm to relationships, health and psychological well-being are some of the most common impacts. The highest at-risk groups of people that we connect with at Wesley Mission are those who have experienced trauma, where gambling becomes an outlet for overwhelming emotions, compounding the harm caused. But change is coming. Between royal commissions and inquiries into casinos, the New South Wales Crime Commission's recent investigation into money laundering in pubs and clubs, and federally, inquiries into online gambling and its impacts on people experiencing gambling harm, we're at a tipping point in Australia. Poker machine reform and a cashless gambling card are now key election issues in the lead up to the New South Wales state election on March 25. And you can join us in addressing gambling harm as we put pokies in their place.
Tanya, the question is this: what is your party's response to the Crime Commission's recommendation? But more importantly, what will your party do to address the epidemic of gambling harm in New South Wales? 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. This is a very, very critical issue for many families and individuals and communities right across New South Wales and beyond. In fact, I know firsthand the damage and the pain that comes from gambling that's out of control in someone's life. It tears families apart. There is no question that this is an area of great and immediate concern. And I'm extremely proud that Premier Dominic Perrottet has already announced that a re-elected Liberal and National government will move within 5 years to have cashless gaming cards in all poker machines. Like, that is setting the future very clear, very unambiguously for the people of New South Wales. And he has said repeatedly that he will work with the industry and with the clubs and pub sector to assist them to transition to that place. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition hasn't quite got to that significant step. Perhaps he will, I don't know, I can't speak for him. But certainly Dominic Perrottet, having taken the lead from the New South Wales Crime Commission report, indicated that there is significant problems that are happening in the poker machine pubs and clubs area, and they recommended this as a way forward. It has also been supported by police, it's been supported by churches and charities, and has also been supported by unions, cashless gaming card. So we have a lot of stakeholders in this space that are urging government to move forward, and I'm just very proud that Premier Dominic Perrottet has taken that leadership step and is going to be moving forward in that space. There is a lot of work still to do. Personally, I think we need to look more closely at the online gambling, the gambling that happens on people's iPhones or at people's desktops or laptops, because that's also an avenue where there's a lot of gambling taking place, and I think more so younger people find it easier and more convenient to gamble with those platforms. So while we've set the direction forward in terms of poker machines, I believe we also need to expand that moving forward. And also it's really important, just in closing these comments, those statistics of how many poker machines there are in New South Wales. I don't know about you, but I found them alarming, absolutely shocking. And I will say that that alarming number of poker machines was allowed to grow under the former Labor government, under Bob Carr. And I think that is a terrible legacy, a terrible devastation that was allowed to take place. And I'm proud the Liberals and Nationals are actually going to bring change and bring reform to that much needed space.
And as I said, if you want to hear a response from the Labor candidate, you'd have to take it up individually, unfortunately. But we'll move on to the next question. So special religious education is our next topic. Thanks, John.
I'm Tom Eastlake, and I'm a Christian special religious or education or an SRE teacher in a New South Wales public school. And I'm also a representative of the Interchurch Commission for Religious Education in Schools. In recognition of the benefit of SRE to both students and broader society, the opportunity to opt into SRE classes in New South Wales in public schools is supported by not just the majority of the public, but also both sides of New South Wales Parliament. SRE supports multiculturalism, it counters religious bullying, it supports cultural and religious identity, and it supports a student's spiritual well-being, which is one of the 5 pillars that the Department of Education has identified as critical to a student's ability to connect, succeed and thrive. But to support the continuation of SRE, we're asking for your help. Historically, the school enrolment form has included a question on religious identity, but this has been removed. This question existed to allow both the Department of Education and the SRE community to do the same thing as an enrolment question does about a student's learning needs or their medical history, and that's what that seeks to do today. It allows the school and the SRE community to deploy resources to ensure that a student's well-being, their spiritual well-being, is supported in line with the well-being framework for schools. This, rightly, helps the Department of Education ensure that appropriate resources and care are offered to all students enrolled in public schools in New South Wales. Since this question has been removed from the enrolment form, it has become increasingly difficult to support SRE in schools. The reality is that schools can't host and SRE teachers can't teach classes in schools if they don't know where the students are. So in standing for New South Wales Parliament in 2023, our question is, are you willing to confirm your support for SRE and commit to seeing the reintroduction of the religious identity question to the school enrolment form?
I'll repeat the question. So, are you willing to confirm your support for special religious education and commit to seeing the reintroduction of the religious identity question to the school enrolment form? Tanya, 3 minutes.
To answer those 2 questions, it's yes and yes. I have seen a number of reports provided by the former member for the CDP, Paul Green, in the Upper House, who has done a lot of work in relation to special religious education and the impact and the support that provides to young people right across this state. So it is fundamentally critical aspect to provide access to support, to encouragement, to pastoral care for our young people now more than ever before. And can I also just go back to what Premier Dominic Perrottet actually said this week, where he made a firm commitment to continue supporting special religious education. So he has made that public statement, and I think that's really important for families and for people of faith, whatever faith you may hold, to actually know that is his support. But in relation to the second part of the question, that's fine change that was brought into the enrolment form was a surprise to me. And so if you don't know what's happening, then you can't fight and defend or influence or bring change. So to that point, my answer is yes, I will work to see that reintroduced. But I also want to go back to, again, what Premier Perrottet said this week, where he committed to ensuring ongoing dialogue, ongoing discussions with the representatives of faith communities to talk about all sorts of issues, to talk about structural changes and how they impact those communities of faith. And so with that ongoing commitment to engagement, to dialogue, and it's not just a talk fest, it is actually hearing from the grassroots what changes are happening either through the bureaucracy or through society, bringing that feedback back into the government that is leading the day. That way we can get the information to bring change or to bring leadership in areas that we perhaps may not be aware of. So Premier Perrottet has committed to supporting religious special education, but also to ongoing, real, genuine dialogue with leaders of our faith communities, so that these issues are actually found out before they're implemented and before we have to do a whole lot of work to reverse them. So that's my comments.
The next issue has to do with, I think, what's been described as conversion therapies, which is an umbrella term that encompasses all kinds of things. And my understanding is that in Victoria it encompasses things like even praying for someone, but we'll have the video. The question is somewhat different to the end of the video, just to make it clearer what the concerns are that we have as a Christian community from the point of view of the Freedom for Faith organisation. So the question that I've emailed Tanya is different to the one that you'll see in the video, and that will come up at the end.
Independent MP Alex Greenwich has signalled his intention to bring so-called conversion therapy laws to the New South Wales Parliament. These laws purport to ban barbaric practices such as electric shock treatment that seek to change a person's sexual orientation. There is, however, no evidence that such practices are occurring. In fact, conversion therapy laws in other states go much further than simply banning barbaric practices. Under such legislation, it is illegal to aid or counsel someone in accordance with traditional religious stances regarding sexuality and gender identity, even with the person's clear consent. In Victoria, for example, the legislation prohibits anyone, not just psychologists or religious leaders in schools, churches, synagogues and mosques, from supporting or giving encouragement to someone to live in accordance with traditional sexual morality. Astonishingly, during the parliamentary debate on the laws, the Victorian Attorney-General confirmed that it would be illegal for anyone to support a father who decided that he is no longer heterosexual, but who wishes to remain committed to his pre-existing marriage in order to raise his children. This is because such support, even from his wife, would be considered as suppressing his homosexual desires. Furthermore, the laws prohibit anyone, including the parents of young children, from encouraging their child who is questioning their gender identity to maintain the unity between biological sex and gender. Even some acts of prayer reflecting traditional religious teaching on sexuality or gender identity are criminalised. In addition to the prospect of criminal prosecution, religious schools and institutions stand to lose their accreditations or charity status if they breach the laws. This represents an unprecedented state violation of both freedom of religion and an individual's personal choice. This election, ask your candidates, Will you oppose legislating any conversion therapy bill that prevents people from practicing their religion or encouraging others to do likewise?
So the question, as we have it, if there is a bill introduced banning conversion therapy practices, will you commit to protecting consensual pastoral care such as prayer and other spiritual support for a person who wishes to live in accordance with their faith? Tanya, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. So the media reports are fairly accurate in relation to the proposed prohibition on conversion therapy in New South Wales. I know that there's a draft bill that will be introduced in May by the member for Sydney. I think it's also important to understand that both the Leader of the Opposition and Premier Perrottet have both come out in support of the general objective, which is to prohibit harmful practices. And I think that's very important, that we are wanting to single out those actions and activities that have been demonstrated to harm that individual. Nobody in society would want to see anybody harmed in any way, shape or form, and I certainly do not. But I'm also aware, as we've seen in the clip, that legislation can go well beyond that to prohibit praying, even if the person asks for prayer, to actually stop that from taking place, to prohibit a family, mums and dads, speaking with their child. That is a step too far. No legislation should in any way interfere with an individual person's choice and desire to seek support or assistance or counselling as they personally see fit. And so Premier Perrottet has actually stated last week that he does generally support banning those harmful practices, but he will commit to engaging in very careful consultation with a range of stakeholders to ensure that the bill that is finally presented to the Parliament is a bill that is correctly balanced in prohibiting those harmful practices, but also enabling the person who chooses to seek support for themselves is enabled to access that support without punishment or without fear or without consequences to the individual. It is something that I am personally committed to, because I have met people and I've listened to people's personal journeys that they have taken in this whole area of questioning their gender identity, and it's an area where people need love, where people need support, and in some cases they need professional support and professional counselling to assist them. And it's all about creating an environment where that person and their journey is supported and respected along the way. And that is something that I'm really, really passionate about.
That brings our set questions to an end. We're going to bring up the Slido and the mobile number again. What we might do is just break for a minute and give you an opportunity, and if you're watching online, to send your questions through to Slido or through to that mobile number, and we'll pop them across to Slido. So we'll just take a little break for a moment. You might want to grab a cup of tea if you're at home or whatever you're doing, and we'll come back together in a couple of minutes for just free-ranging questions, and we'll see how we go. Okay, Tanya. Got a few questions coming in, and John's helping them appear this way. The first question, Tanya, is this. After such a time elected and with the majority party, so the party that's formed government for such a period of time, what more can you bring to the role that you haven't yet? And what has stopped you so far?
Do I have a time limit?
Let's go for it. I'm not quite sure. I think the rules are probably more around about 2 minutes or so, but we'll just, not half an hour.
Yeah, okay, for sure. So thank you to the person who asked that question. So yes, I've almost been in this role for 12 years, and to be honest, it feels like we're only just getting going. That's what it actually feels like. We spent the first term of our government repairing the budget and beginning to implement a structure that will enable us to put money aside and save money and prepare to build the infrastructure pipeline that we've started to build, just commencing 8 years ago, over, I think it's like $112 billion of infrastructure right across our state. It's never ever been seen before. We're actually spending more to improve our communities than what the federal government is doing for the entire nation. It's happening here in New South Wales. But there is still so much more to do. If I can just talk locally, there's a couple of local projects that I still want to see supported. In terms of Mulgoa Road, anyone that lives in Glenmore Park will go, yay, let's get Mulgoa Road expanded and delivered. Expanding Mamre Road, we've got funding for stage 1, but we need to finish that all the way down to Elizabeth Drive, upgrade Elizabeth Drive, and also see some of the local schools fully air-conditioned, and see the delivery of the $65 million announcement for Fernhill there in Mulgoa itself. So there are a couple of the little projects, but the big goal, the big aim right now is to ensure that as we plan and as we begin to deliver the Aerotropolis, which sits around Western Sydney's airport, that project, the Aerotropolis, is delivered with generations in mind. That the structure, the alignments, the placemaking, the infrastructure, the technology, the services are actually planned and delivered in a way that sets up our community for the generations to come. One of the fundamental reasons that I wanted to move into politics was I just didn't want to see people live in Western Sydney and have to commute hours for a good job or a good career in the city, but I wanted to see people live in Western Sydney and work in Western Sydney in fulfilling jobs and careers here, right here. And that's what the Aerotropolis and the airport precinct will deliver. And that is one of the most exciting, transformative projects that we've ever seen in Australia. It's big words, but even I don't quite comprehend the scale and the significance of what is actually going to be built around that airport there in Badgerys Creek. Hence why they changed the name of my electorate to Badgerys Creek.
I neither ask the questions nor have to respond to them, but we have a question which is this, it's a complex question that makes statements, so you might want to refute the statements, and I'm very happy to repeat the question. Okay. You have failed to protect religious freedom, parental rights and life. Labor and Liberal have agreed that you will introduce conversion therapy laws to New South Wales. These laws stop a parent opposing their child's gender change. Why do you believe this gender ideology? Why allow children to make such a life-changing decision? Would you like me to read the question again?
No, if you can leave it there so I can read it myself.
Absolutely.
That can help guide.
Yep.
Okay.
It's this
That
bit
one?
here,
Yep.
and then it continues up there.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So I touched a little bit on the religious freedom journey, so let me just repeat that. This might take a bit longer than 2 minutes, but that's okay. Very important one. But following the passage of the same-sex legislation federally, there was a commitment by the then Prime Minister to bring in protections for religious freedoms. Okay, that was actually a part of the agreement to pass the legislation. That has not happened. Now, I know the former Prime Minister attempted to bring in legislation to protect religious freedoms federally, Scott Morrison, but that was not successful. While we were in New South Wales, there was work going on that indicated that New South Wales had some gaps in our laws and in our structure, and that was demonstrated by the Parliamentary Committee, which was mentioned in that video. And at the time, a number of members of Parliament, including myself, were advocating for New South Wales to move ahead and fix those gaps. That was delivered by that Upper House inquiry, and it was also indicated by Philip Ruddock at the time. He also did a piece of work and showed us where we needed to and where we could amend the legislation to bring greater protections. As I said at the time, Premier Badgerys preferred to wait for the federal government to pass legislation that would then cover all of Australia under the one bill. When that failed, then COVID and then ICAC and all those things came into the mix, and it sort of fell by the wayside. But that is something that I personally am really, really attuned to and very committed to pushing and supporting in the next Parliament. There is a clear way forward that indicates what we can do to bring New South Wales up to the same level as other states and territories, but we're not there yet. And I look forward to being a Member of Parliament that agitates and pushes for that. Let me go parental rights and life. Well, in relation to life, can I just remind everyone that in 2019, when we were elected, a few months later, the member for Sydney, once again, together with our current health minister, gave notice that they were going to bring in the abortion legislation that would decriminalise was the term that they used, even though abortion was still legal, even in New South Wales and Australia for decades prior to this legislation. But what that legislation actually entailed was a legalisation, like no restrictions whatsoever on the termination of a pregnancy. And myself and a few of my colleagues, and they were across party lines, worked very, very hard for 2 months. We tried to stop that piece of legislation. The numbers were against us. We tried to bring change to that legislation. It looked like that was not going to be successful. And it was a very, very rocky, difficult, stressful, hard time for those 2 months fighting for humanity. And I was very public in my opposition against that legislation. I spoke lots on radio, Sky News. I was interviewed with newspaper articles. In the Parliament, I was standing up speaking on behalf of amendments to the legislation. In the lower house, the house I represent, those amendments were rejected by the proponents of the legislation. Insofar as, if a baby is born alive following a failed termination procedure, that baby should be afforded the appropriate medical care. Well, that amendment was rejected. And I could go on and on and on. So I'm firmly, I do refute that. I've not done anything for life. I refute that. I'm on the record, and people know me. You just search my name, even prior to 2019, and know where I stand. In fact, when I was newly sworn in the Badgerys government as a minister in the 2017, I just stepped out of Government House after being sworn in as the Minister for Mental Health, Women and Ageing, and we're in the press pack. The Premier was there, Gladys, and the new ministers, and all the press were around us, and I was the first person asked a question, a new minister, and I was asked the question by an ABC journalist who said, "Are you pro-life or are you pro-choice?" And I said, "I'm pro-life." 2017. And so it's on the record, and you can look more into that if you like. And the conversion therapy query I've discussed prior. And there's a lot of talk going around about what this bill will or won't do. The reality is it's a draft bill and consultation will take place. And in that process, what usually happens is the original bill gets amended and changed and moulded. And that's the process that I look forward to being a part of.
Thank you. The next question is the Australian Law Review, what's the commission called? The Australian Law Reform Commission has released a consultation paper proposing removing rights of faith-based schools hiring teachers of faith. What are you doing and what can we do to prevent this, was the question. So what are you doing? I think you've answered this question in large part. Is there anything else you'd like to say in response to that particular question?
Probably just talk about the process.
Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah. So there are a lot of opportunities that take place where either parliamentary committees conduct inquiries or a minister of the day requests a particular stakeholder to go away and investigate an area and to come back with a report for information, for advice, for recommendations, for guidance to the government of the day. There are individual organisations, it could be anyone, that have representatives of the community who are passionate about a particular thing. And so they lobby, they do petitions, they write to the minister, they get involved in seeking change through the parliament. So the New South Wales government, whoever is elected to government, has all of this information coming to it all the time. And the role of government is number one, you receive the information, but what you do is, because you receive it, it doesn't mean that you agree with it. It doesn't mean that you adopt everything that it says. What you then do is begin your own process of testing what this particular organisation is requesting you to do. And that process is consultation. And in some cases, a consultation can go for 2 or 3 years because it's quite... the consent laws, that went for like 2 years. That was a very complicated issue. And some are quite quick. But I think it's important that people understand that because there's a particular organisation recommending a course of action, that does not automatically mean that that is what the government will adopt and then implement. I think that's important to understand.
Now, unless any other questions are forthcoming, this is the last one. Tanya, do you see yourself in a cabinet position going forward? What was your biggest lesson from being a minister in cabinet?
Oh, okay. I don't have a crystal ball. It's not up to me, no. Look, in terms of being a minister, I might answer it back to front. I had the absolute honour of being a minister in the Badgerys government for 2 years, Minister for Mental Health, Minister for Women and Minister for Ageing. And I learnt so much. I just was completely flabbergasted at how many people across our community are working to help each other. Like, it blew my mind, the organisations, the groups, the activities, the events that are working to help fellow New South Welsh people. So the love, the grassroots love and care and concern that I witness in our community, it blew me away. The other thing that I was really taken by surprise is little old me, humble little old me, the little girl that grew up on 50 acres in Newcastle in the 70s, little old me, I could make a decision that affected tens of thousands of people. And that was a huge responsibility, but also an amazing opportunity to bring significant change. Some of my proudest achievements were securing the $700 million over 10-year mental health infrastructure program of works, including getting New South Wales' first mother and baby unit, whereby a mum of a new baby who may fall into serious postnatal distress, postnatal psychosis, can actually be cared for in a professional environment with their newborn baby. That's now opened up in New South Wales. Before, the mother and the baby were separated. So significant change that probably most people would never even know about. But I know for those people, it is a significant improvement to their life. The New South Wales baby bundle, that was one of my passions, that a mum who gives birth to a child, they get a beautiful bag from the New South Wales government full of all new baby items. That was a concept I had as Minister for Mental Health and Minister for Women, because I knew how the issue of postnatal depression for women and men was not an easy topic to talk about. I think because when you're a new mum or a new dad, I guess society expects you to be happy and excited about your baby, and that can be an obstacle for you actually being honest about where you are at as a new mum or a new dad. And so I had the vision of creating very, very gentle information cards that would bring up the topic and ask the question on the back of the cards where it says, I'm 1 month old and I'm 2 months old, that you'd put next to your newborn baby and take a photo. So on the back of those cards was information about signs and symptoms and where to go for help, and all that was put together in a beautiful, called the baby bundle. Well, that's one of the things I'm really, really proud about, tackling the stigma around mental health and mental distress. So whatever the future brings, I don't know, but I'm just focused on trying to win my seat for the Liberal Party and continue to do what I've always been doing for the last 12 years, is to work for the community, to work for the people who elect me, and to work for the people who may not vote for me. Because as a member, I represent everyone in that electorate. And that's some of the most wonderful achievements are the achievements I know I've helped individual people, and no one will know the story of the impact, but I know and they know, and that gives me great joy.
There's another one. Okay, there's actually a few more, but I'm going to leave it at one. Okay, and this question does make assertions, and so in other forums it'll be ruled out of order. Okay. I can describe it that way, but I'll ask the question and let you respond. From 2021 onwards, many employers introduced COVID vaccine mandates. Employees were given a deadline to receive the COVID vaccine or face being sacked. This was justified by the notion that vaccines would prevent transmission of COVID, a notion that later turned out to be false. Has the New South Wales government conducted an audit of how many people were fired for refusing COVID vaccinations in New South Wales? And B, will there be compensation or reinstatement of lost jobs for those who are fired under false pretences?
Thank you.
There we go.
Yep, all good. Which one? All of those, okay. All right, so I was a very, very outspoken member of the New South Wales Parliament against vaccine mandates and against the atrocious lockdowns that happened targeted in Western and Southwestern Sydney. I was not well liked by the government of the day, even though I was a part of the government of the day, because I genuinely felt that what they were doing, particularly around the vaccine mandate, where they were forcing people to undergo a medical procedure which was completely contrary to everything we know about informed consent, it was a terrible, terrible decision. And I don't resolve from that statement at all, and I never will. I spoke out vehemently, regularly, Facebook Lives, videos for weeks and weeks on end, sending emails through to ministers' offices, trying to get them to change the policy. Sadly, they didn't, and I was as dismayed as everyone else. I was inundated with thousands and thousands of emails and phone calls from people I won't go into the details, but let me just say that that entire time of people, it was traumatic back then, and it still remains traumatic for those people. And I've not forgotten, and I know they haven't. At the moment, our focus is on the election campaign, but I am still speaking with people who contact me about their now vaccine injuries. We are having more members of the federal parliament start to speak out, in particular Russell Broadbent down in Victoria. He's now starting to speak out in the federal parliament around those situations. I know data is coming in from overseas, and I get data nearly every day sent to me from all over, not only Information Australia, but globally being sent to me. There are members of parliament who are now, and I agree with them, calling for a full and transparent inquiry into everything governments did during the pandemic. Not just about the mandate, but everything from lockdowns and everything else. They're calling for a complete, transparent, honest review and inquiry into that whole process, because fundamentally we must learn, we have to learn whether what was done was the right thing to do and how those decisions were made, and whether we need to change the settings for the future. We can't just shut that chapter and try and forget it and move on. We must learn from the mistakes that were made. Let me just see. So in relation to that inquiry, I'm not sure the format it will take. Some are calling for a Royal Commission, others are calling for a separate inquiry. I know there was an inquiry done by 3 private citizens in Australia, did an inquiry and released their report a couple of months ago. But there needs to be an inquiry done at the governmental level. When Premier Perrottet became Premier, it was just a few months after he became Premier that he announced, he was actually here in Penrith, he announced that the New South Wales government was moving from mandate to risk-based assessment approach. So if the leader of either the organisation or the department, when they did a full risk-based assessment, determined that there was still a requirement to have the vaccine, that would be still in place, but they'd had the ability to then withdraw the mandate from their workforce. That is still working its way through the system. However, the New South Wales government doesn't control every entity and business in the state, and there are still organisations, there are still institutions who have the mandate in place. So hopefully this inquiry, whatever structure it takes, our government will be bold and brave enough to embrace that, to actually move forward and do a complete and thorough review of everything that took place, so that we learn from the mistakes and we learn what worked well. We learn how to engage better with our multicultural communities who were severely at a disadvantage during all of that process, and how we particularly look after our children who sadly are still not quite back where they are, either academically or even in their mental health space from the lockdowns that they went through. So there's a lot to be reviewed, a lot to learn from in terms of moving forward, and just hope there's a government. It'd be preferable if the federal government led that, but let's hope someone actually takes up that challenge and begins that process. Did I read? Okay.
I'll call it quits there. Yeah. Let's thank Tanya for visiting us tonight and sharing with us. So thank you, Tanya, so much. Thank you. And if you've been watching online, thank you for watching online, and we'll say goodbye to you now, and we're going to have a cup of tea or something together.